Italy. You know it for Parmesan, gelato, Ferraris. But that's not why I'm here. I'm here because hidden beneath all of this beauty is something much more radical.
How would you feel if he were making 300 times what you make?
Non lo voto.
Eccolo, è good. Go home.
Voto un altro.
Go home.
Let's rewind. I'm from the US, the land of Cheese Whiz and billionaires, where 60% of people live paycheck to paycheck, the rich get richer and richer, and it all keeps humming along because we're told that's just the way it works. But what if there's another way? I booked a flight to Italy because I heard about a place where they make world-class Parmesan and where the economy works by a different set of rules.
Each one will get a share based on what each one produces.
We have about 2,000 of employees.
750 shareholders?
Yes.
You are a shareholder, yes?
Yes.
Shareholder?
Yes, yes.
In Emilia-Romagna, for more than a century, they've been testing a radical idea. What if wealth and power weren't just hoarded at the top?
We are considered one of the richest regions in Italy, and I think the success has been determined by this collaboration.
So what's the secret? What has Emilia-Romagna figured out that we haven't? And how am I supposed to understand anything if everyone's speaking in Italian? Enter Francois, my half Italian, half French friend.
Hi, America. How are you?
Who joined me on my journey to find out how a region can be so successful and so tasty when billionaires aren't calling the shots.
America, you don't know what you're missing. We're about to find out, though. Are we going for all of this inside of this?
It's better.
Okay. Some might say that the cheddar must be tucked under the net, but we're here for Parmesan.
Our first stop, Cooperatives Borgataro, a small dairy in the mountains of Parma. Here, they make Parmesan the same way that it's been made for over 1,000 years.
Oh, yeah. That is a formidable cheese.
What does it smell like?
Parmigiano Reggiano.
Yeah, it does.
Ilaria Bertinelli is our guide, an expert in the fine art of Parmesan.
Tell us a little bit about your personal involvement in this whole process.
My personal involvement is that I have cheese running in my veins because my family has been making cheese since 1895. Tradition is the result of innovation that was successful.
It turns out there's another tradition that has deep roots in these mountains and in this cheese. An economic model born out of struggle. They call it La Cooperativa.
The co-op were a necessity, and absolute necessity. Every wheel is 45 kilos, and you need 600 liters to make one wheel. If you have 10 cows, you will never make 600 liters, so you need to be together.
Cooperatives Borgataro is a farmer cooperative. It's a fancy way of saying a bunch of farmers got together and said, hey, let's share.
Very often, the farmers wouldn't have the money to make an investment like a dairy. So by joining forces together, they can get a loan that will fund the investment.
Once they have a dairy, they can produce in larger quantities and compete at scale.
You have a stronger negotiation power if you can sell a certain number of wheels rather than one wheel of cheese.
Then they share the profit based on how much milk each farmer produced.
Oh, man. Maybe I'm rusty. I think it's official. I'm sticking with journalism.
In Emilia-Romagna, farming is dominated by cooperatives, from Parmesan to wine to produce. The result is an economy that, among other things, has kept rural communities alive.
Have small farmers been able to stay alive in this region?
Oh yes, because of Parmigiano Reggiano. They can survive with 20 cows and still have an income that enables the family to live on that.
That's unheard of in the United States. Surviving with 20 cows.
E quindi la tua famiglia ha potuto mantenersi e rimanere qua e non emigrare
Grazie alla cooperativa. La cooperativa, insomma, ha salvato, diciamo, le aziende in queste zone, voglio dire.
Ma anche tua famiglia.
Anche la mia famiglia, sicuramente.
In Emilia-Romagna, co-ops aren't a fringe idea. They make up a fifth of GDP in the entire region. They're in construction, transportation, childcare, from the smallest dairies to the largest supermarkets. But for all their variety, they share one thing in common. There's no boss calling the shots, no outside investors pulling the strings. They are owned and run collectively by the producers, the consumers, or in the case of CPL Concordia, the workers themselves.
This is a concept in America that we're really not familiar with, but is it right to say that the members, the shareholders, can choose their boss, choose who runs the company?
Yeah.
And is that you right now?
Now I am the boss.
Paolo Barbieri is the 33-year-old president of CPL Concordia. From the outside, CPL looks like any other company. They build energy infrastructure that supplies power across Europe to cities, hospitals, and companies like Lamborghini. But the workers here aren't normal workers. And their boss isn't a normal boss.
You are a shareholder, yes?
Yes.
Shareholder?
Yes, yes.
Shareholder?
Yes.
Shareholder?
Not yet.
At CPL Concordia, 750 out of 2,000 workers are shareholders, meaning they own the company collectively.
We're in the call center, and about half of the people working here are worker owners.
This is worker democracy in action. Every shareholder gets one vote, whether it's the president of the company or a worker on the factory floor. They control how the business operates, who's at the helm, and how much the boss gets paid.
How would you feel if he were making 300 times what you make?
Non lo voto.
Eccolo, è good.
If he was making 300, no vote.
Adesso l'ho votato. Se fa qualcosa che non funziona, non lo voto.
Go home.
Voto un altro.
Go home.
And you have the power to do.
Quello è il potere, chiamiamo potere, che abbiamo noi, soci.
CPL isn't the only worker co-op in Italy, but it stands apart as one of the biggest and one of the oldest, founded all the way back in 1899. Its lasting success begs the question, why did cooperatives become so widespread here and not somewhere else?
One of the most important differences is that the Italians like to do things on their own, no? Not to work for others.
Vera Zamagni is a leading expert on Italian cooperatives.
I'm always saying that in the case of Italy, the success of cooperatives is also due to the fact that we do not have big business.
Why doesn't Italy have big business like we do in the US? It turns out, cooperatives had something to do with it. The earliest cooperatives emerged as small groups of artisans and workers. Some were socialist, others were Catholic, all united by the belief that power should be shared and profits should stay close to home. But in the 1920s, the country took a dangerous turn. Mussolini's fascists came into power, and immediately, they saw the cooperative movement as a threat.
I understand why fascism was against cooperativism.
Fascism was against cooperatives for the simple reason that cooperatives are grassroots organizations that will not be controlled by any government on top.
Under Mussolini, cooperatives were crushed, and power was consolidated in the hands of just a few corporations. When Italians resisted fascism, they were also resisting that economic model. But after the war ended, cooperatives came back to help rebuild war-torn Italy. And in 1948, the right to form cooperatives was enshrined in the Constitution.
that co-ops in Italy have to be supported by any government because of their role in improving the cohesion of society, which means that no government in Italy can run against cooperatives unless it changes the constitution, something that is not easy, obviously, to do.
Over the years, cooperatives grew their influence, organizing themselves into powerful federations like Conf Co-op and Lega Co-op.
Lega Coop in Emilia-Romagna ha 1000 cooperative associate e 165.000 lavoratori.
In the US, cooperatives are mostly forced to fend for themselves. But in Italy, laws are built to help them grow.
Ciascuna cooperativa destina a un fondo il 3% degli utili che servono per promuovere nuova cooperazione.
In Emilia-Romagna, this system of co-ops has helped transform the region from one of the poorest after the war to one of the richest today. And now, co-ops are everywhere, even providing services we usually associate with government.
We have more than 10,000 social cooperatives in Italy, and they deliver more than 50% of the Italian welfare.
Social co-ops provide elder care, jobs for people with disabilities, and in cities like Reggio Emilia, they handle over half of municipal waste. Members make decisions together, like whether to buy a new truck.
Avete fatto investimenti tutti insieme?
Sì.
E vi è capitato di decidere questi investimenti?
Sì.
E voi eravate sempre d'accordo?
Per
Preferite questo che prima?
Sì, preferiamo questa.
But even with laws and infrastructure in place, the road to forming a cooperative isn't always so smooth, especially when powerful financial forces are standing in the way.
È stata una cosa inaspettata perché la fabbrica andava benissimo, non c'era nessun problema, non c'era stato nessun sentore della possibilità che si potesse chiudere.
Snupo Tapanasi has worked in this factory for most of his life, building axle shafts for brands like Ferrari, BMW, and Maserati.
Quindi io sono uno dei più anziani, diciamo, sono entrato in fabbrica nel 1987.
For decades, the plant was one of the largest employers in the region. Hundreds of workers with steady paychecks and a future that they could count on. But in 2018, a British private equity firm took over. And just 3 years later, Snupo got an email that changed everything.
Tell me how it felt in the moment, the first time that you got the email that said you were laid off.
Una situazione veramente imbarazzante. Quando siamo arrivati qua ho visto persone lo sguardo sperso, qualcuno era scioccato.
All at once, the factory was shut down. 422 workers had lost their jobs. In America, that would have been the end of it. You pack up and you leave. But here in Italy, they do things a little differently. In July of 2021, Snupo and hundreds of workers walked through the gates and took over the factory.
È stata la cosa più naturale del mondo. Se ci chiudono la nostra fabbrica, rientrare nella nostra fabbrica, per poi cercare di lottare per dare la possibilità di nuovo alla fabbrica di ripartire. È stata la cosa più naturale del mondo.
There's a precedent for this, the Marcora Law, which lets workers buy out their factory when the business is in crisis. And over the years, plenty have done just that, turning failing companies into thriving cooperatives. But this time was more complicated. Even though the workers had developed an industrial plan for the factory and raised millions of dollars to fund it, the owner was unwilling to sell. A man by the name of Francesco
Borgomeo. That's the guy? All right.
So the workers took a different approach, calling on the regional government to intervene on their behalf.
Abbiamo spinto per fare una legge regionale sui consorzi. Vuol dire che all'interno della fabbrica ci saranno tante zone in cui ci saranno tante realtà che possono venire a produrre qua.
But their fight isn't over just yet. Even with the new law in place, the owner still refuses to sell.
Le leggi possono essere le più belle del mondo, dopodiché ci vogliono gli uomini. Se le persone non cercano di sopportarsi, cercare di unire le proprie lotte, non puoi cambiare rapporti di forza.
Do you think the cooperative model can survive even in a modern economy with global competition?
Sure.
Of course you do.
It's not simple to give an answer, but I'm really sure that cooperative model is a good model for a good society.
Democracy is hard. It's messy, but people choose it again and again for a reason. So why is it that when most of us clock into work, the place where we spend a third of our lives, we leave democracy at the door?
Do you have anything you want to say to American workers who might not have the powers that you do?
Direi che è sfortunato. Cosa devo dire? Io sono fortunato che lavoro per una cooperativa.
Farsi una bella vita bisogna lavorare. Per togliersi le soddisfazioni che si può togliere bisogna lavorare, perché altri sistemi, altri modi io non li conosco. O che uno nasce fortunato.
Small rural communities would not be able to be rural communities if it didn't work. Without co-ops in the mountains, it was impossible to have that.
Spesso noi accettiamo un qualcosa perché fa parte un po' della nostra cultura, ci fanno pensare che quello è l'unico mondo possibile. La fabbrica viene chiusa e te va a cercarti un altro lavoro, fine. L'invito magari a una persona che vive in America è quello di magari cercare di rimettere in discussione il proprio sistema, perché se noi non rimettiamo in discussione il nostro sistema non possiamo cambiare il nostro sistema.
Italy's cooperative economy isn't perfect. It isn't a utopia. It's just a fraction of the economy in one region of a country that's struggling with many of the same issues that we are. But it's a living, breathing example of an alternative to the model that we know all too well, where wealth and power are hoarded in fewer and fewer hands, whether you like it or not.
We are a region that is characterized everywhere by the presence of co-ops, and I think the success has been determined by this collaboration.
Hi, thanks for watching our video. If you like this story and you want more stories like this, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel to get more Perfect Union in your feed. And if you have stories that you want us to investigate, drop them in the comments below.